I know there
well.
are a number of national matters that you had anticipated to discuss, but I know waking up this morning, you're a woman with heart, and you're always informed, your ears are on the ground, the matters that impact the people. Your heart must be broken as a woman this morning with all what has unfolded over the past few days.
Oh, well, to respond to that, indeed, I think there's a spirit of great restlessness in me right now. Restlessness in me as to whether I should speak out, or whether I should just maintain my silence and just observe what is going on. But you are correct. I think I feel there's a void and a restlessness in me right now.
Why the restlessness, though?
Well, because of the state of things in our country today, it's almost like a crisis, one after the other. We know we have the crime situation, and then you have the question of the relocation of the CDC residents and so forth. And the restlessness really stems from the fact that we don't seem to be grappling with the issues in the manner in which we should grapple governments over the years. There are certain things which are missing in our society in terms of legislation, in terms of human rights, which is the core of development. Our legislative procedures, the structures are not there. And I mean, we have not been learning lessons over the years. We seem to be concentrating on other aspects of economic development, not realizing that the core of our development is actually the protection of human rights and putting the structures and framework in place to ensure that the rights like housing rights and all those things are actually guaranteed and they are protected, and that people are having a good standard of living. So that is my concern and my concern about the society. We seem to think we are making progress, but I don't think we are making the progress in the right direction as such,
Yeah. You get a sense, Ms. Francis, that the core issues which impact human rights, we talk about it when they raise their head, but it just fades into the tomorrow. It's not a priority for us.
Well, let me answer that, because we as a people, we have been failing ourselves. My organization, the National Center for Legal Aid and Human Rights Incorporated, will be celebrating the 25th anniversary in June this year. We started well with a couple people, and we built up, and we had a certain educational programs at the library and so forth. We don't realize that we have to come together in organizations such as these, there is strength in unity, and we can do research, and we can ensure that legislation is passed to address certain issues in the society when it comes to human rights. We don't seem to understand. We have a misunderstanding of human rights because, it has been focused on the state and the question of policing, proper policing and that kind of thing, which is very important because it's a question of liberty and the rule of law. And you must realize the state has also to be under the rule of law. But there are other very important human rights, because human rights are not divisible. They are interdependent, interrelated, and indivisible, all connected to one another. Take, for instance, the housing rights. Housing rights are very, very much very important human rights because they also impact other human rights, the right to life, the right to work, and all those things. So they are all related, and we have to see it from that point of view and come together in organizations which can actually have some impact and to monitor what the government is doing to ensure the government are taking the right steps to ensure human rights in all its comprehensive nature actually is protected and enhanced. For instance, I can recall attending a conference in St. Vincent on housing rights since 1998. There is international legislation governing housing rights, and governments are supposed to actually comply with. I mean, it stems from the International Covenant for Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, United Nations Covenant Treaty. I'm not too sure that St. Lucia has ratified this treaty. Nevertheless, there's lots of general comments and lots of guidance which have been given over the years to ensure that governments provide adequate housing for people, because forced evictions is a grave violation of human rights. It is, because the right to adequate housing, as I said, is very important because it impacts on the right to life. The quality of a life actually is really diminished when you have no housing. So, for instance, that's how I'm looking at the question of the eviction of persons from the CDC housing area. I'm looking at it against the context of the question of legislation. We don't have legislation dealing with right to adequate housing in St. Lucia, whether in the private sector or not. You have heard of persons being evicted. I mean, to say we had the Miku thing last year, even though it's a lawful eviction, but there must be certain guarantees and safeguards when those things happen to ensure that persons are not exposed to the elements like rain and so forth. Take the CDC housing. You have certain procedures and there must be guarantees. This can be seen as a forced eviction. Although you have the question, okay, necessity that the buildings are structurally unsound, but then, however, it is still a forced eviction in terms of maybe arbitrariness, the suddenness of the situation, the guidelines. Have they been given sufficient notice? Is 2 months or 3 months sufficient adequate notice? Has there been sufficient consultation in advance? Where is the alternative area you'll put those people? So these are some of the procedures which have to be carried out to ensure that you are in keeping with the international standards on housing rights. And I don't think we are actually we have ignored those things in St. Lucia for a little while. And I'm looking at it against that background, the whole question of human rights and the indivisibility of human rights and the impact it can have on other human rights like the right to life and so forth. We have to ensure those things are really addressed. There must be an opportunity for genuine consultation to the people affected and adequate notice. Information must be given to them. We haven't heard anything. We simply just heard that they have to move because of the structural unsoundness. But should be lessons for us to put legislation in place right now.
That's
to ensure whether eviction is by the state or by private individual landlords, that there are certain guarantees to protect persons, other human rights when such decisions are being made.
Excellent. So that's where I was going, because what you say in those procedures which guard against and protect against human rights infringements must be spelled out within our laws. That's what you're saying.
Very correct, because as I said, you have this organization, the Center on Housing Rights and Evictions in Switzerland, in Geneva, and they have been putting out the comments and the directions that government should follow. Those general comments, they call them, makes it incumbent on governments to guarantee that people who are evicted, whether illegally or in accordance with the law, are to be ensured of some form of alternative housing and so forth. So this is an organization which can also help governments, and they put out several comments since 1997. That's a United Nations agency. Several comments which speaks to the duty of governments to ensure housing rights are very important human rights. I cannot stress it, I cannot stop stressing that, because it affects our quality of life, our constitution itself, security, your right to privacy, your family, all those things are guaranteed in our constitution, the right to security, family rights and all those things. Now, when you evict people, all those rights are being eroded. So we have to see it from that point of view as a modern society, which are governed by international norms and standards. That's how we have to see ourselves. That's where we have to go in that direction. In some countries, they actually amended their constitution to make the violation eviction a violation of human rights. India, even in Russia, you have that. The UK. We have not looked at our housing legislation for years. We have not looked at that. And now is an opportune time for us to give some kind of attention to our housing legislation to ensure that it actually fits into our constitutional rights when it comes to privacy, family rights, and all those things. We have to do that. Yes, we have to constitutional reform. Yes, we are going to the CCJ. But what about those other aspects? They're very important. Human rights are not divisible. They're interrelated, and we must see it from that point of view.
Yeah. Quickly on the housing, that Center for Housing Rights and Eviction, what role do you see it playing? Does it have any role now in the current day situation, reference to the CDC buildings? Can they provide or lend any support or guidance?
Well, you see, the point is that you must have strong human rights organizations, NGOs, with some kind of relationship with that organization. And then you can call upon them to assist you. It also enjoins that governments must provide legal remedies, lawyers for persons who were evicted forcefully and so forth. All those things come into play, but you must have the organization on the ground which can collect information, which can interview the victims of the eviction and so forth, and that doesn't exist in St. Lucia. I've been trying actually for 25 years.
Yes.
if people can join the organization and we can get assistance from the international community, that is not happening at all. And why are we so, narrow-minded when it comes to human rights?
Because we think
education must be done.
We think human rights is Mary Frances. That's what I was going to. We think human rights is Mary Frances, so human rights should be left to you alone. But that's not what it should be.
But who's for the media and everybody must come on board.
And that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing now. That's
we have to mobilize and educate ourselves for liberation. That's what we have to do as a people. Don't depend on government. If government is falling short, then we have to then monitor and to push them to the area that they should really be concentrating on,
Yeah. Finally, on the housing CDC issue, what should be reasonable in terms of the package and the support provided to the tenants there? What's your recommendation or advice?
Well, adequate compensation and to ensure there's an alternative side for the people that is not going to actually impact them negatively in terms of their work. Don't put them in a place where it's too far off their workplace that they can get to town. They're not encumbered. Their daily living does not suffer in terms of their activities and so forth. So there must be an alternative side. There must be actually consultation, especially when you have vulnerable people like women and children. Well, they're the backbone of the family. You have to hear the plight of those people, discuss with them, and offer a compensation package. Sufficient. I heard it's 2005. How can that be? That is just crazy. The notice is too short. What really concerns me, I think it's a long while now since governments, not only this present administration, but since Labour governments before, and government, they have known of the structural unsoundness of those buildings, but they have not moved with haste to address the situation, whether for political reasons, because those people probably vote one way or the other, and so forth. They have not done it. I've been under the last administration of Mr. Shastner. I heard they were looking at the site at Mount Pleasant. So they keep just looking at it, but not having the will to actually do something. So now it boils down to that, whether the engineer has given them the information to say that it is something waiting to happen very soon, and therefore they just suddenly give them this kind of rush notice. They had sufficient time to actually put those people in the position that they should be, to ensure that there's an alternative site, compensation, reasonableness, and those things.
Consultation as well.
Too much.
And consultation
adequate
as well.
Compensation. That's what's a remedy in the law, that they deserve legal remedies. They deserve compensation because they are human beings, and then their life will be impacted. The right to employment, if they're in a place that's too far from the CDC where they are now to get to work. All those things must be factored in when you are doing those types of moves. And governments have a duty on the international law to observe those safeguards and procedures, and if they are not existing, to put them in place. This is a time for us to do that in St. Lucia. And not only the government, also private landlords, when they're evicting people, albeit even though the eviction is lawful through the courts, but there's still safeguards to give them adequate time to get alternative accommodation. Don't put them out to the elements like they did in Miku and so on. We have to address those things legally, for legal framework, to ensure that there is adequate standard of living, because housing rights is also guarantee you an adequate standard of living. It is basic. Without a house, you are nowhere.
Thanks so much, Ms. Francis. Let's take a trip for me quickly. We don't have much time. Take a trip for me quickly. Let's go down south. The poor housing in Vieux-Fort, unemployment, lack of access to social and other state services. How much is that contributing, you think, to the deterioration of the social fabric of our society and the criminal activity that we've seen over the past recent days?
Well, here you are again. This is related. An adequate standard of living, so that people will not be living in hovels and living in the state that they are living in, some of those areas which they describe as ghettos and so forth. This is something that that has been left unaddressed for too long, and I think this is also part of what's going on in thing. I also am of the opinion that COVID has also exacerbated the situation, the frustration and the depression, and the question of our agencies, law enforcement agencies, are they also contributing in terms of where do all those guns suddenly just came from? Yes, there were shootings in the past, but where on a daily, on a weekly basis, where those guns came from? So we have to also look at this aspect of law enforcement, whether there are not some corrupt elements within those enforcement agencies, customs and whatever, police, that have been encouraging and facilitating the spread of illegal weapons in St. Lucia. And whilst we are looking at the situation right now, I understood that there will be emergency legislation. It is all good and well because it is the duty of government to provide security for the citizens of the state to ensure that people's lives are protected. Yes, this is very important, and I recognize that. However, we must ensure that we do not get back into another situation of 2011 where you had 5 people shot by police in Beaufort on the 5th of May 2011 during police Operation Restore Confidence. Whilst the people are on the siege in Beaufort, we want to protect them. The government has a duty to pass legislation. But at the end of the day, I hope we will not end up with extrajudicial killings, because up to now, 12 years going, there has been no sufficient redress for those people. The 5 that were killed in Beaufort, or 4 rather, were killed in Beaufort on the 5th of May. Up to now, nothing has done about it. Whether the DPP's hands are tied, we don't want that to happen this time, to hear that people are suddenly killed, and then there was a verdict. There was an inquest in 2016 which said there was unlawful killing. Why is it that that matter has not reached the courts up to now? So they can do their operations, they can pass their emergency legislation because there is a threat to the security of the citizens down there and their life. But however, the police must, as the Prime Minister said, they must do all what is legal, all what is necessary in legal terms. I don't know what that's a contradiction to me, and warning them about human rights. But however, they're going to be lenient on the police. All those words were used when he was addressing the situation. So you see, the government has to be very careful about those situations and keep their eyes open and put structures that when those operations or when those things are being done, there is an institution in place. Right now, we don't have any independent coroner. You have the magistrates who used to sit to do inquests into those killings. When there is a killing by the state which is supposed to be unlawful, there must be an accountability. That is not in place. I wrote in 2010, 2011, asking the government to set up a separate office of coroner, an independent coroner's office that can do their own research and investigation. Don't rely on police just providing information. We don't have that yet. So, should in case we have another set of police killings, if this before emergency legislation and so forth, where is the institution, where is the structure to deal with that and to provide accountability and transparency? We have to be very careful as a nation if we don't want to see ourselves going to war with ourselves, We have to be very careful.
I know you'll be paying close attention to the execution of those emergency powers which will be adopted and passed by the Parliament. Finally, Miss Francis from us, and then we'll let you go. Do you really get a sense now that we have lost all appreciation for the value of life in this country? Fathers being murdered in the streets, mothers are being killed. Have we no respect for life anymore?
Of course, indeed, there's been a moral decay. Not only now, it has been started for a while, and people just don't care anymore about life and peacefulness and living together and being your brother's keeper. And again, I'm still saying, I think to me, those problems stem from the lack of guidance. I mean, the poverty, the family breakdown, all those things, the religion. People don't care about religion anymore, whether that is a fault of the churches and the way they themselves live in, because you have pastors and the churches who live in great material lifestyles. I mean, their congregation can hardly eat, but they are living lifestyles which to me is not very, very equitable in terms of their congregation and themselves. So there's a breakdown in our society. The values that used to sustain us as the people are no longer believed in, and that's why we have this crisis in our hands. So we cannot just put up our hands in the air and say, that is it. We still have to grapple with the issues and see how we can use, whether it's through the law, whether it's a social intervention, to make sure that those things are happening. There's so much inequity in our society. Persons feel alienated. They feel estranged from the society, and they are human beings too. They're looking at the rest of the society who have the means to live adequately, and they have not. Why? They're blaming the state. They see the state as the enemy, and they just use that frustration to lash out at each other and killing. And furthermore, the fact that we still have the question of hanging in St. Lucia, we first must start fundamentally the state to observe the right to life by abolishing hanging in our legal system. That's where it starts. Number one, the right to life, but also the state. Why the state is saying don't kill, the state cannot kill in our names either.
Absolutely.
And the whole world has moved away from the death penalty. Why we in the Caribbean, with our history, slave history of dehumanization and violence, why do we hold on to that institution which has long been abolished on the world scene? These are the things. The state must set the example by abolishing the death penalty, showing that they have respect for life. That's what they must do, because there are other means of punishing people who murder in this modern day and age.
We'll leave it there for now, Miss Mary Francis. I want to thank you for your time. I know we tried for a number of weeks to get you on, and I really appreciate the time that you have gifted us this morning.
Well, I don't mind at all, because I think you're doing a very good work, young people on the young station. Very good work.
Thank you so very much. You have a nice day, and we'll be in touch.